Hi, welcome to the Toellner Consulting Executive Safety Minute 25.0 that addresses prevention through design. This Executive Safety Minute, like the other Executive Safety Minutes in this series, is designed to prepare you for having an effective conversation with your leadership team and fellow professionals for the purpose on influencing their value sets and forward strategies. To use this Safety Minute, I suggest that you review the whole presentation and associated text, and then pick the slides that you want to show and discuss with the executive team. As with the previous Executive Safety Minutes, I am providing you with a complete set of slides to facilitate your learning process and prep you for delivering either the entire presentation or, at your discretion, a shorter version. While this Executive Safety Minute reflects knowledge and strategies shared in earlier Safety Minutes, it is designed to stand on its own. Remember that these Safety Minutes are not just about transferring knowledge. They are also all about motivating and engaging the leadership team, which should serve to build their relationship with you and with each other. As noted in earlier presentations, relationships are a key to success in building forward strategies that will be embraced by the whole team. Enjoy and have fun. Prevention through design is a topic that I am really passionate about because in my 40+ years of experience, it represents a strategy that while many may resist because they lack the experience and understanding, but once you have sold them on the ideal and they observe both the tangible and intangible benefits that comes with prevention through design, it then becomes an expectation that they embrace and support and quite often demand. Prevention through design, in the simplest of terms, is a way to prevent and control occupational injuries, illnesses, and fatalities by designing out and or minimizing hazards and risk before the contracting process and construction begins. When I was working on my civil engineering degree in the mid-70s, prevention through design was not a topic of discussion in any of my construction management classes, but they did briefly mention the importance of constructability and even talked about the proverbial skyhook not always being available when you needed it most. I graduated from college, and in one of my early professional assignments as a site construction engineer, I asked some operations personnel what I could do for them that would make it easier and safer for them to operate the facility that we were constructing for them. To say the least, they were excited about having the opportunity to provide input, and even more excited when we delivered a facility that was much easier to operate and maintain. The icing on the cake was that they recognized that I valued their personal input, and they were very forgiving when I, as a young field engineer, made mistakes in some of the work I was executing. They knew I was doing my best to take care of them, and in return, they were willing to mentor me on their perspective of how field and design engineers could do a better job of interfacing with operations. It was a journey for both me and them. When someone asked me why prevention through design is important, my first of 5 typical responses is that prevention through design demonstrates values, and experience has shown that having the right values in place always sets the stage for success. Early in my journey as a safety professional, I learned about the hierarchy of controls. Managing risk to reduce exposures requires a strategy that can serve as a guide on how best to approach the challenge of risk reduction. This hierarchy of controls is a suggested strategy courtesy of NIOSH, the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health. When looking at the diagram, we note that the higher up you go in the chart, the more effective the control, and we see in the diagram that the elimination of a hazard is the most effective way of reducing risk. This then begs the question, can we, during the design process, evaluate potential risks that may be present during the construction, operations, and maintenance phases of the facility, and then think of an alternate way of designing the facility or the construction execution process that ultimately results in a lower level of risk for those who will construct, operate, or maintain the facility. For example, rather than having someone making a welded connection at height, can we in our construction process have the weld made at ground level? Making the weld at ground level reduces the exposure to falls and also reduces the exposure to sparks falling onto potential combustible products between the weld being made at height and the ground. Next on the hierarchy of controls is substitution. Can we substitute something that is less hazardous? For example, in lieu of using a toxic chemical such as toluene to clean a surface, can we substitute a non-toxic substance? These non-toxic substances are out there and worthy of exploring, not just from a safety perspective, but also from a cost perspective as well. Next on the hierarchy of controls is engineering controls, with one of the better examples being to isolate people from the hazard. One of the more common examples is the use of guardrails to prevent falls from heights. So when someone asks me why prevention through design is important, my second response is that prevention through design can be a very effective means of reducing risk, and as we reduce risk, we inherently improve safety performance, which means fewer people being injured and fewer families being impacted by their injuries. When someone asks me why prevention through design is important, I also usually note that prevention through design reduces the reliance on PPE. We still live in a world where many people believe that PPE is the solution, and they fail to recognize that if the PPE does not function as designed, then the statistical outcome of an event, once it has been initiated, is linked to luck or sometimes the lack of it. If someone is working at height and their only protection is a harness and a lanyard, then every precaution has to be taken to assure that the lanyard and harness are going to work as designed, and as history has shown, that if they do fall, we then have to have the capability of performing a timely rescue without putting the rescuers themselves in harm's way. And don't forget, on top of this, we have to assure that they utilize the PPE to start with. A key fundamental in engineering and process design is our level of confidence that the proposed design or the proposed work execution process will deliver the desired outcome. Our clients want to understand from day one that the project can be executed on time, within budget, and consistent with design standards, and at a high level of safety. If it appears that any of these parameters may not be achieved, then we are expected to influence the outcome such that they are achieved before the project is completed. Experience has shown that our chance of success goes up the earlier we start in the schedule. Once we get behind, whether it be schedule, cost, quality, or safety, it is difficult and expensive to play catch-up. Influencing the final outcome is akin to an uphill battle, whereas when time goes by, the slight increase in grade turns into a hill that then turns into a mountain that then turns into a sheer cliff. So when someone asks me why prevention through design is important, my fourth response is that prevention through design can deliver a greater chance of success on influencing the safety outcome, and I always prefer the path with a greater chance of success if for any reason to avoid disappointment and/or failure. Up until this point, we have primarily focused our discussion on prevention through design around safety, but the benefits of prevention through design go far beyond safety. Prevention through design is akin to a capital investment that brings dividends throughout the life of a facility. If we make it easier to operate and maintain up front, it will be less expensive to operate and maintain as time goes by. So when someone asks me why prevention through design is important, my fifth response is that prevention through design is simply good business. Those things we do to improve safety usually have a positive impact on the other business parameters like quality, cost, schedule, and operability. When someone asks me why prevention through design is important, I also note that it is one of those strategies that is never too late to start working on. Prevention through design is something we can work on starting with the conceptual stage all the way through the decommissioning stage. Safety is a journey with plenty of prevention through design opportunities along the way. During the conceptual stage, we can establish goals and objectives that include prevention through design in the preliminary design and evaluation stage. As we move into the preliminary design, we can leverage the hierarchy of controls and assess risk from the start and then strive to eliminate hazards when possible or substitute less hazardous processes and embrace the concept of making it convenient to work safe. I like to use the phrase making it convenient to work safe because I believe it brings a different mindset to safety. Rather than just being driven to address hazards, making it convenient to work safe is proactive and reflective of the spirit that comes with prevention through design. Here's a good example. In high-rise building construction, if we design the steel columns during the detailed design stage with holes at 21 inches and 42 inches above the floor, we make it convenient to install guardrail cables during the construction stage. This practice has also proven to be cost-effective from both a material and time perspective. During the procurement stage, we can select equipment that not only meets the process design specifications, but also makes it easier for the operators to operate the equipment. A simple example is installing larger hand wheels on valves that then serves to reduce the physical strength required to close or open the valve. The construction stage is always ripe for opportunity when it comes to prevention through design. Good examples include designating walkways for workers to move through the site that are physically separated from roadways being used to bring in steel and equipment. Another example is designing structural steel connections that use beam seats versus hanging connections. The journey continues through the commissioning and startup stage, through the operating and production stage, and even through the decommissioning stage. There are plenty of prevention through design opportunities along the way. I have noted earlier in this Executive Safety Minute and numerous other Executive Safety Minutes that safety is a journey, and that every journey needs a journey plan. The prevention through design journey, like all the other journeys, needs a journey plan to serve as a starting point. Here's an example of such a journey plan for prevention through design. While prevention through design is not about compliance with government regulations, it is wise to start our journey by asking the question, does the design or work practice comply with government regulations and standards? After all, being in compliance with the standards is a hurdle that is not optional. Next, we consider as to whether industry best practices are being followed. Best practices usually represent how the better performers in a given industry plan and execute the work and are always worthy of consideration. Best practices exist because others recognize that going beyond the expectations of the standards can provide added benefit in both safety and cost management. My many years of experience has taught me that we have brilliant people out there in every aspect of the business. And if we ask them the right questions, they will present us with ideals on how to improve safety, quality, schedule, and cost management. Given that, the next reasonable step in the prevention through design journey is to test as to whether we have solicited new ideals from the designers, constructors, operations personnel, and maintenance personnel. Ask them the right questions in the right context, and they will give you some very valuable perspective. Along with this, we should be soliciting lessons learned along the way. This is driven by the simple question as to whether there is a better or safer or more efficient way to do this the next time. Our lessons learned are only as good as our ability to capture, validate, and then reflect those learnings into our own management systems and processes. It is also worthy that we share with others in industry such that they too can benefit from those lessons we learned. As you go through the lessons learned process, you may want to double check as to whether they are truly lessons learned or lessons repeated. Lessons repeated warrant additional inspection as to why the lessons may not have been integrated into your standard work processes. Executive Safety Minute 5.0 of this series addressed the topic of asking the right questions. And we learned that if we ask the right questions at the right time and in the right context, it can help identify the next steps to improving safety. We even included a manager's guide to asking the right questions that can serve as a starting point for developing our own set of questions linked to the topic of prevention through design. Following this slide, I'm going to share with you some sample questions you can share with your team as to how to better leverage the concept of prevention through design. The first time you ask these questions, you may not get much of a response or feedback. That's okay if you recognize that any new concept that we try to mature is simply a journey in itself. If you don't get a response the first time you ask the question, then simply suggest that they give the question some thought, because if for any reason it is important to you and you plan to ask them the question again. Here's an example of questions I think we should be asking ourselves during the design phase. What hazards are present? For example, do we have people working at height? Do we have the potential to expose people to high levels of energy, whether it be electrical energy or maybe a gas under pressure? Do we have simultaneous operations taking place where the work processes may conflict? If you have a team working up on a platform and a team working below them on the ground level, then ask the question, can the work at the ground level be done at a different time? If hazards are present, can we eliminate the hazards? Can we perform the work at ground level versus working at height? Can we construct the facility in modular form that then simply bolts together? If we can't eliminate the hazard, then can we substitute something less hazardous? And if not, can we install physical barriers? And if not physical barriers, could we change the way the work is to be executed? All of these questions are consistent with the hierarchy of controls we presented earlier in this discussion. Taking a different approach and context, we can ask the question, what can we do to make safety convenient? The previous mentioned example of designing steel columns with holes at 21 inches and 42 inches above the floor to accommodate guardrail cables during the construction stage is a great example of making safety convenient. Building in walkways on roofs to accommodate future maintenance requirements is also another example. Asking the question, how do we make it easier from a constructability perspective, is an important question. Two good examples linked to steel construction is using as few bolt sizes as possible and avoiding awkward or difficult to access connections. We continue down the journey path and follow the question on constructability with the question, how can we design the facility such that it is easier to operate? And how can we make it easier to maintain? During the design stage, we should also be asking questions in the context of checking the design against standards and industry best practices. What standards are we using for the basis of our design, and does our design meet the expectations of the applicable standards? Are there any gaps or shortcomings that you believe may exist in the standards? How does our design compare to industry best practices? And is there any way we can improve upon those best practices? Rather than simply relying on standards and best practices to establish the minimum hurdle to clear for safety, should we not challenge our design teams to apply some critical thinking as to how they can design in safer work execution processes? Why not open up the table for ideals by asking the questions, if you were free to make any changes to improve safety, what changes would you make and why? If you were personally going to construct or operate the facility, how would you design the facility different and why? Are there lessons learned from earlier designs that we should apply to this design? Recognizing that we never make changes in isolation, who should we vet these changes with? My years of experience has solidified my belief that there are incredibly bright individuals working in construction, operations, and maintenance that represents a tremendous amount of intelligence and experience, and they have potential and ideals just waiting to be unleashed. It is important to seek out those individuals, build relationships with them, and then include them in the discussion. In regards to the potential of bright individuals being out there, let me share with you a very personal experience to make this point. My father had a long history of heart disease. Over a 20-plus year period, starting at the age of 68, he had 7 stents placed in his arteries around his heart. He had a heart valve replacement and a bypass. He had both his carotid arteries sliced open and scraped clean, and then he had a pacemaker installed. Given all these miracles of modern medicine, he lived to the age of 92 despite his heart disease. During the first or second medical procedure, where they were going to install several stents in his arteries, I had the opportunity to meet with his heart surgeon. This surgeon had quite a reputation for being really good at what he did, and his bedside manners were impeccable. As he sat down with me to explain the stent procedure, he sketched out a drawing of a heart and the accompanying arteries. As he was doing this, I made an interesting mental note that I had never seen a drawing of the heart and arteries that appeared to be drawn in a fashion consistent with what one would see in 3D isometric piping drawings used in pipe fitting. And I found that utterly fascinating. The heart surgeon continued with his explanation of the procedure, and then at the end asked me if I had any questions. I did not have any questions, but I did make a statement of confidence that it appeared to me that he had been doing this for many, many years. He looked at me and smiled and said, "Mr. Toellner, I've only been a doctor for 17 years." Now, I was thinking this doctor was at least in his late 50s, if not mid-60s, and being an engineer, I naturally started doing the math in my head that led me to ask him the question, if you've only been a doctor for 17 years, what, may I ask, did you do before you became a doctor? He looked at me and smiled and said, "Mr. Toellner, for many years, I welded pipe in West Texas, and at the age of 40, I decided that I wanted to be a doctor and a surgeon, so I quit welding, went to college, and here I am today, operating on hearts. Isn't that cool?" At that point, all I could do was smile because it was absolutely fascinating to hear that someone could, at the age of 40, go from being a pipe welder in West Texas to a heart surgeon in one of the best medical centers in the world. It also explained why he drew the heart and arteries isometrically. I also had to smile because at one point in my life, I had contemplated on being a welder because I enjoyed welding, and in the 70s, it paid very well. I too, like my dad's heart surgeon, made a decision to go off to college and pursue a different passion and career, and here I am today, both a professional engineer and a certified safety professional. During my many years of experience in supporting construction operations, I can't begin to tell you how many construction sites and operational facilities that I have visited and worked where I have met individuals just like my dad's heart surgeon. While they may have been welders or pipe fitters or mechanics or operations specialists, they were incredibly bright, and on any other day, given the right timing and opportunity, they could be engineers or lawyers or doctors or even safety professionals. And given the opportunity, they can and will give you some great ideas on how to make the job site safer. All you need to do is bring them to the table and ask the right questions. Questions like, what can we design different that would make your job safer or reduce risk? Or asked in a different way, how would you design this facility to make it easier to build, easier to operate, and easier to maintain? Or, what can we design different that would reduce the cost to construct or operate or maintain the facility? These are valid questions because sometimes those things we do to reduce expenses often benefit safety. Sometimes we're afraid to ask these questions because we think it will only lead to shortcuts, which is not always so. The next question to ask is, how can we make this easier to construct, operate, maintain, and decommission? This builds upon the ideal that if we make it easier to construct, operate, maintain, and decommission, then that too may benefit safety. Early in my career in construction, I built myself a reputation by asking these questions and was richly rewarded with ideals that benefited both safety and business performance. It also earned me a lot of respect and initiated a lot of beneficial relationships and friendships. To be successful in implementing a prevention through design program, we need to understand some of the historical and real challenges that come with implementing anything new. Quite often the challenge is a lack of a forward strategy, which is important because if we don't have a forward strategy, then by default, we are taking a potential hit or miss ad hoc approach, which then leads to ad hoc results, which although it could be successful, it is not accompanied by a high level of confidence. Another challenge is understanding and addressing potential disablers, which are those things that are holding us back. Quite often as a society, we focus on enablers, which is not a bad thing, but without addressing the disablers, our efforts to enable may be, at best, inefficient. A third observation on challenges to prevention through design is the perceived and sometimes real lack of available tools that can serve as a starting point. I'm going to address these three challenges in the next several slides. Much of the Toellner Consulting Executive Safety Minute series focuses on and stresses the importance of having a forward strategy in place. This is important because without a strategy, the tactic you attempt to apply may not be effective and ultimately may prove to be a waste of resources. Here's an example of a simple forward strategy. We should start with establishing a value set and expectations for embracing prevention through design. A key to success is aiming high to start with, but not so high that it's impossible to achieve. Remember that it is a journey, and if we take on the journey in reasonable steps, we will increase our chance of success in completing the journey. Also, if you aim low on establishing the value set and expectations, you will likely be successful in hitting low, which may ultimately be a complete miss. We need to provide tools, time, and a process for prevention through design. The process does not need to be a perfect process from day one, but it does need to be flexible and supported with sufficient resources. Involvement is important because you want the team to understand that this can be something they can do for themselves versus somebody else doing it for them. With involvement comes ownership, and with ownership comes an increased chance of success. Because our management systems are only as good as the controls that come with them, we need to have a stewardship process in place. Are we doing what we say we're going to do within the management system plan? And if not, then why not? How are we going to hold ourselves accountable for delivering results? A key part of our strategy is capturing and sharing lessons learned. How often are we going to reflect back on our execution plan and ask our team as to what went better than planned and why? Also, what did not go as well as we would have hoped and why? And is there something we could do different next time? For lessons learned to make a long-term difference, we have to roll those lessons into our standards and our operating procedures, and maybe even change out some existing tools for newer or more effective tools. In some instances, we may even discover that we need to simplify. As noted earlier, having a strategy is important because without a strategy, your journey may end up like taking a road trip without a map. There's no telling where you'll end up, and whether it ends up being a pleasurable journey or the journey from hell, the end destination at some point may be completely out of your hands without a strategy. Executive Safety Minute 10.0 in this series addressed the topic of understanding disablers. While we live in a world that is constantly promoting enablers, and that's not a bad thing, sometimes we learn that even the best enablers may not be able to overcome the disablers that exist. Disablers are like the proverbial ball and chain that is holding us back in our forward progress, and even though we have enablers presented to us, overcoming the disablers is still an uphill battle. It is important that when we are not making the forward progress we would like, that we call a timeout and try to ascertain what disablers may be contributing to our uphill challenge. Potential disablers may include a lack of vision, lack of motivation, and lack of leadership. If leadership and vision are missing, then it is unlikely that the team will be motivated. No surprise, there may be some resistance to change and a misperception as to extra or unnecessary cost. Some may not understand that prevention through design is an investment versus being an extra expense. Prevention through design is about solving the problem of eliminating or reducing exposures to hazards. But if the designers do not have a fundamental understanding of what hazards may be present, then how will they know what to address? Quite often, we take for granted that everyone can see the same hazards we see, but that's not always the case. If the designers do not understand the hazards that may exist, then that in itself is a disabler that we need to address. Prevention through design works best when there is interaction between the designers, constructors, operators, and maintenance personnel. A disabler may be that there is a lack of a process that brings these individuals to the same table from time to time. Sometimes the disabler is that the right tools to facilitate and serve as a guide for critical thinking is missing. When OSHA rolled out the process safety standard, many in the industry learned that using a systematic, step-by-step process for evaluating process hazards was the key to success. Maybe a similar approach to prevention through design would be helpful. Understanding and learning how to overcome potential disablers is really important for progressing the prevention through design journey in an efficient and effective manner. If you want to learn more about disablers and how to uncover them, please take a look at Executive Safety Minute 20.0, which addresses how to execute a cold ice review. A typical disabler, and an easy one to solve, is not recognizing that there are already many tools available to industry to help jumpstart their prevention through design effort. And I know for a fact that there are many trying to upgrade these tools to make them easier to access and be more effective. It is important to understand that their success also depends on us in industry being willing to share our learnings and experiences for others to benefit. I have created this Executive Safety Minute at my own expense, and I'm willing to share it with industry at no cost because I believe that prevention through design is an opportunity to not only improve safety performance, but also improve every aspect of business performance. Everyone benefits from the application of prevention through design. As you discover safer ways to execute the work, then please take the next step and share that with industry. I can't say enough positive things about the Prevention Through Design initiative being undertaken by the Global Center for Safety at Arizona State University. Their vision is to establish a global center for safety that supports world-class education, research, and outreach programs focused on both prevention through design and the integration of safety and health into the core businesses of our organizations. Arizona State University believes that better informed and educated engineers and constructors and engaged leadership will drive change to integrate safety into corporate practices. Arizona State University has initiated a series of workshops to identify, exchange, and leverage experiences and expertise on prevention through design research, practice, and education. These efforts are designed to support the entire spectrum of engineering, design, contractor, client, and owner organizations, and U.S. colleges and universities and government agencies. You can be part of this effort by simply participating in the workshops and, most importantly, providing feedback on your needs in regards to prevention through design, and also sharing experiences, both positive and negative, that your team may have witnessed that will benefit others. The second resource that I want to share with you is the NIOSH website focused on prevention through design. You will find on this website almost everything you will need to convey the benefits of prevention through design, and no surprise, you will find many links to research and tools that can serve you well in getting started with your own prevention through design initiative. The third resource that I want to share with you is the Construction Industry Institute website. CII is based at the University of Texas in Austin and is a consortium of more than 140 leading owner, engineering contractor, and supplier firms from both public and private arenas. These organizations have joined together to enhance the business effectiveness and sustainability of the capital facility lifecycle through CII research, related initiatives, and industry alliances. Here's just one example of how CII is making a difference in changing how the world builds. This course explains the design for safety motivators, barriers, and enablers, the design for safety concepts as it applies to construction, how to address safety in the design process, and what resources and tools are available to design for safety. In addition to this course on designing for construction safety, CII has courses on hazard recognition and communication, introduction to construction safety, partnering, and safety leading indicators. I was first exposed to the CII effort 20 plus years ago and recognized then that they are an incredible resource to our industry, and their contributions just continue to grow every year. Another valuable resource linked to prevention through design is the American Society of Safety Professionals. The example shown here is an ANSI ASSP standard addressing how to avoid, eliminate, reduce, or control occupational safety and health hazards and risk during the design process. In addition to several other standards, in many technical articles addressing prevention through design, the American Society of Safety Professionals also provides an online course. The course is an instructor-led course, approximately 16 hours in length, delivered over a 4-week period. It serves as an excellent opportunity for gaining a foundation of understanding the application of prevention through design. To summarize this discussion on prevention through design, I think we have to start by recognizing that prevention through design is simply good for safety and good for business. I have observed tens of billions of dollars worth of heavy construction projects, and my observations have been that those projects that have focused on prevention through design were not only the safest projects, but were also the projects that were typically completed on time and within budget. I also observed that a conscious decision by the leadership team versus just the safety professionals to lead the effort increased the chance of success. Without a doubt, leadership can make it happen. Prevention through design, like many other aspects of our business, can be a journey. The journey may come with detours and disappointments, but hey, that's not uncommon with many aspects of life and business, so please don't give up, and there is never a better time to start than now. For many years, I worked in an organization where the better performers managed the business by asking the right questions. And the best of the best not only ask the right questions, but they ask them in the right context, in the right tone. Leveraging context and tone many times stimulated critical thinking, which led to a better understanding of the problems, which then led to better solutions. I've seen that strategy work with prevention through design. Speaking of strategy, without one, your plan may not be efficient nor effective. And without strategy, you may end up with ad hoc results which may prove to be disappointing. When you encounter that proverbial roadblock or bump in the road in your prevention through design journey, it is best to understand what disabler's are holding you back. Quite often, the disabler's are the real problems behind the obvious problems, and sometimes they're even the elephant in the room that nobody wants to talk about. It is always efficient to leverage your existing resources, which is not only the current tools out there that can serve as a starting point, but also the people familiar with how the work is executed. Those folks out there at the workplace not only understand what the problems are, but they quite often know the solutions to those problems. All we need to do is ask them the right questions in the right context and tone. And finally, we all benefit by sharing our learnings to not only help others within our own business relationships, but those outside those relationships as well. I've asked the question many times in the past when we were going through lessons learned reviews as to how many of these lessons learned were actually lessons repeated, which ultimately reflect a failure in our management systems. It is important that we not just seek out lessons learned, but integrate those lessons into our standards and operating procedures so we don't have to repeat those lessons. I will close out this discussion with a simple question that you can take with you back to your organization. We live in a world that sometimes challenges us with the notion that most new things in how we do our business are going to be an uphill battle. I've always had a notion that although it may seem like an uphill battle, the crest may very well be around the next corner, at which point it may level off or even change to a downhill slope. Given that thought of optimization, why not continue the challenge and push forward? The question I want to leave you with is this: how is your team going to progress their journey on prevention through design, and how are they going to share their learnings and experiences so others may benefit as well? Now I will open up the floor for any closing observations or questions you may have on prevention through design. Thank you for your time and your participation today. If there is any way I can help your team with their prevention through design journey, please don't hesitate to contact me. And remember, we as a team and as individuals can make a difference in protecting the environment and protecting people. I hope this Executive Safety Minute was both useful and motivational. Have a good day. Thank you.